In this video, we are going to cover isomerism of alkenes. Alkenes are characterized by hindered rotation about the double bond. Unlike alkanes, which contain only carbon-carbon single bonds and rotation about which is free, and that results in a number of conformations which we have studied already, alkenes have hindered rotation about the double bond, which results in existence of different isomers of alkenes, so different compounds. So unlike a single bond, rotation about a carbon-carbon double bond is not free. There is energy barrier for it. An energy barrier is consequence of existence of pi bond. So for rotation about a carbon-carbon double bond, pi bond has to be broken, and typical pi bond has energy of about 65 kilocalories per mole. So that's the amount of energy that has to be put in for rotation to occur. The intermediate in such rotation is a biradical. That's short-lived and high-energy species. Biradical literally means a compound or species that has two radicals in it, so two unpaired electrons. And here is an example of such reaction mechanism. So, for example, starting with cis-2-butene, if energy is supplied in form of heat or light, carbon-carbon pi bond is broken and a biradical is formed. Biradical has only carbon-carbon single bond, so rotation is free. Biradical is short-lived species, so pi bond reforms rather quickly and isomerization has occurred. So cis isomer has been converted into trans isomer as pi bond is formed. As a result of hindered rotation about a double bond, alkenes exist in form of different isomers. And that type of isomerism is called cis-trans isomerism or geometric isomerism. Geometric isomerism is older term, and cis-trans isomerism is now generally accepted term. So that's a term that should be used. Cis isomer of an alkene has identical or similar substituents on the same side of double bond. So this is an example of cis-1,2-dicyclohexyl ethene. Trans isomer has similar or identical substituents on opposite sides of double bond. So this is an example of trans 1,2-dicyclohexyl ethene. In each case we have identical substituents, two cyclohexyl groups and two hydrogens. Since hydrogens are so common in alkenes, often it helps to look at hydrogens, whether hydrogens are on the same or opposite sides. But you can look at either pair of substituents. According to systematic nomenclature, isomers of alkenes are designated as EZ isomers. So designation EZ is based on priority rules. Each carbon of the double bond has two substituents, and those two substituents are assigned priorities based on the atomic number of atoms directly bonded to carbon, directly bonded to each carbon of the double bond. If substituents of higher priority are on the opposite sides of the double bond, then such isomer is designated as E, from German entgegen or opposite. If they are on the same side of double bond, then isomer is designated as Z, from German zusammen or together. So in this case, each carbon of the double bond is attached to one other carbon atom and hydrogen. Carbon has atomic number of 6, hydrogen atomic number of 1. Higher atomic number means higher priority. So in each case, carbon atom has higher priority. So two substituents of higher priority, two carbons, are on the opposite sides of double bond, and so this is designated as E isomer. In this case, two carbons are on the same side of double bond, and so that's designated as Z isomer. You can see that E isomer corresponds to trans and Z to cis. That's the case in general, that E corresponds to trans and Z to cis if compound contains only carbons and hydrogens. If alkene contains other substituents, heteroatoms such as halogens, oxygen, sulfur, and so on, then priorities may change, and you cannot simply rely on this rule that E corresponds to trans and Z to cis. Instead, you have to go through a process of assigning priorities, which means check atomic number of each atom directly attached to carbon of the double bond and find out whether atoms of higher priority are on the same side of the double bond or opposite. Here also we should note how we designate E and Z isomers with line formulas. So top row are E isomers, so you can see that carbon substituents are shown on the opposite sides. Those are alkyl groups on the opposite sides of the double bond. And Z, note how we designate Z isomers with alkyl groups on the same side. And again, you can see that when we are dealing with alkenes that contain only carbons and hydrogens, E corresponds to trans and Z to cis. So you could also say, using trivial nomenclature, that top two compounds are trans and bottom two cis. Here are examples of heteroatoms that are involved. This compound would be pretty much impossible to name or to designate using cis-trans nomenclature. All four substituents are different, so we can't tell which two substituents are identical or similar to say that we have cis or trans isomer. But it's very easy to designate it E or Z. So left carbon actually is carbon 1, and that carbon is attached directly to oxygen and hydrogen. Oxygen has atomic number of 8, hydrogen 1, so oxygen has higher priority. And to indicate that, oxygen is shown in bold. Carbon 2 of the double bond is attached to another carbon, carbon of the methyl group, and chlorine. Carbon has atomic number of 6, chlorine 17, so 17 higher than 6, so chlorine has higher priority. So oxygen and chlorine are two atoms of the higher priority, and they are on the opposite sides of double bond, and therefore this is isomer E. Sometimes we have a tie. We have identical atoms that are directly attached to carbon of the double bond. So first, let's look at left carbon of the double bond. So that one is attached directly to carbon of the ethyl group, CH2 carbon, and hydrogen. So carbon has higher priority. So that's easy. On the left, it's easy to determine priorities. But on the right carbon of the double bond is directly attached to two carbons. Well, that's a tie because they have identical priorities, atomic number of 6. Then we follow in each substituent chain of atoms that have highest priority until we find a difference. Because if substituents are different, we'll find difference. So two chains of highest priority in each substituent are indicated by using different colors. So in top substituent in blue, bottom in red. So when we compare first atom of each chain directly attached to carbon, those are two carbons, that's a tie. Second carbon in each chain, again those are two carbons, so we still have a tie. And then when we reach third atom, that's fluorine versus hydrogen. Fluorine has atomic number of 9, hydrogen 1, so fluorine has higher priority. That means that top substituent has higher priority than bottom one. And now two substituents of higher priority are on the same side of double bond, and therefore this is Z isomer. Sometimes substituents on the double bond contain multiple bonds, double or triple bonds. And then we have to introduce virtual bonds and virtual atoms to be able to correctly determine order of priorities. So in this example shown here, there is a substituent that is circled in this dashed circle that contains carbon-oxygen double bond. That's carbonyl group. First, let's look at left carbon of the double bond. It has carbon and hydrogen as substituents, so carbon obviously has higher priority. So that's easy. Now, when we look at carbon on the right, we have that circled carbonyl group, and at the bottom we have this alcohol substituent COH group. So To determine order of priorities, we cannot directly compare the two substituents because top substituent has double bond. We can only compare order of priorities if all the bonds are single. So we have to convert multiple bonds to equivalent number of single bonds. And this is how we do it. So this is highlighted here. So we redraw the substituent and we redraw the single bonds. So carbon-oxygen bond, of course carbon-hydrogen bond is left unchanged. Carbon-oxygen bond is now represented as single bond. But carbon must have 4 bonds and oxygen must have 2 bonds. So to satisfy usual valence requirements of each element, we add virtual bonds. So to carbon we add additional bond. And now question is, what is going to be virtual atom? Well, virtual atom will be the atom that carbon is bonded to or was originally bonded to by a double bond. So carbon is bonded to oxygen. So at the end of virtual bond, shown here in purple, is going to be oxygen atom, also shown in purple. And we repeat the same process for oxygen. So oxygen forms double bond to carbon. So when we add virtual bond to oxygen, at the end of that virtual bond is carbon atom. And that completes the process. Now we can compare the two substituents. We look at path of highest priority, shown in blue for the bottom substituent, carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and compare that with path of highest priority in the top substituent. So we have 2 carbons as first atoms directly bonded to alkene carbon, and that's tie. Then 2 oxygens, again tie, and then we have carbon, virtual carbon, but nonetheless carbon versus hydrogen. And so carbon has higher priority, that means top substituent has higher priority compared to bottom one. So now when we compare the 2 carbon atoms of the double bond, 2 substituents of higher priority are on the opposite sides of the double bond, which means that this is E isomer. Just a couple of more points. First, if we follow paths of highest priority on 2 substituents and they end up in a tie, we reach the end of each pathway and we have a tie, then we have to follow path of second highest priority on each substituent. And if we again reach the tie, then we will follow path of third highest priority, which will be the final one. And if 2 substituents are different, then we will have to find a difference. The other point is that virtual atoms don't have any substituents. So it is assumed that if we follow path of highest priority and we have reached virtual atom, anything past virtual atom has priority 0. So hydrogen with lowest atomic number of 1, always has the lowest priority, unless we have reached the end of the chain by reaching virtual atom, and there is nothing after virtual atom. So basically, if we have in one chain hydrogen and in the other chain nothing, because we are going past virtual atom, that's when hydrogen will have higher priority. Basically, hydrogen versus non-existent substituent on virtual atom. So hydrogen versus nothing, that's when hydrogen has higher priority. This completes our study of isomerism of alkenes, and next we are going to review nomenclature of dienes.